at the same time.
Seamus sheltered me when I was in so, I mean, it's like, I was at my James' house.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming to the second ever Live Free and Debate series. So, tonight's resolution, resolve, New Hampshire should legalize recreational marijuana. For the affirmative, we have Dennis Pratt, who was the #1 writer on libertarianism on Quora before being deplatformed. He's a principal founder of this lovely establishment, The Shell. He is the chef de village of Porkfest. He's the organizer of Big Liberty Ideas series, which is also held here at The Shell. Been a libertarian for 40 years, originally coming from the left. He first joined the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in 1973. His background is high-tech startups and emerging industries, schooling freedom, ethics, and personal growth. He holds a BA in psychology from Northwestern, an MS MBA, high-tech marketing from MIT, and his ABD in computer science operating systems from Northwestern. For the negative, we have Randy Heller. Randy holds a BS in chemistry and a doctorate in pharmacy. He had a 26-year naval career and is credited with writing the Department of Defense pharmacology curriculum. He is a certified recovery coach and is a supporter of Ron and Rand Paul. Hopefully everyone here voted on the resolution when you came in tonight, right? Okay, so going into the voting, if anybody's not familiar with Oxford-style voting system for these debates, whichever one of these two gentlemen moves the needle more in his favor from these numbers will be declared the winner at the end of tonight's debate. So those of you agreeing with tonight's resolution, 82.35%. Those of you disagreeing, 11.76%, and there was 5.9% of you are undecided. So, without further ado, I'm going to go back, start the timer, and Dennis will start us with...
And how are you indicating time for us?
So I'm going to... Oh, I've already got 5 minutes. 5 minutes left. 1 minute.
You have like a little sign that says that?
Yeah. Okay. So each participant will have 15 minutes opening, followed by a 7-minute rebuttal from each, and then there'll be a 30-minute Q&A. We're going to start off with questions from the participants to each other, questions from me, and then questions from you guys. And I'll bring the microphone over for you guys if you can speak into it. I am recording tonight. If anybody has an issue with that, there'll be video in the back, there's audio in front. And then there'll be a 7-minute closing for both at the end.
So libertarians are often straw men as conservatives who want to smoke pot. But that's just unfair. There's a lot of really good libertarians who are conservative who never smoke pot. But they do understand the ethics of self-ownership. And they're willing to actually fight and defend people who do want to use their bodies and smoke pot. I'm not one of those libertarians. I came from the left, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm debating today. I was pro-legalization before I was a libertarian, and when I was a democratic socialist, I had a lot of ideas for using other people's bodies for my projects, and I had to change a lot of those ideas. One of the things I didn't have to change, though, was my hatred of marijuana laws. I had friends who had been physically hurt by those laws, beaten by the police, chained, kidnapped, caged, raped, and even tortured. I had seen years of their lives stolen from them simply because they chose to inhale something into their own body. The full legalization of marijuana, even for recreational use, is ethically required for free men and is consequentially sound. Let me give you some reasons. Number one, you own your own body, fully and completely. If someone asserts that they have the right to tell you what you may do with your body, to put into your body, they are asserting that they have a superior ownership of your body. And what is it that we call someone who does not own his body, and his body is owned by someone else? We must decide whether we want to be a society of sovereign men or a society of slaves. You don't have to like what someone does with their body. But unless you're willing to promote a society of slaves, you must allow them to choose for their own body. Number two, marijuana laws are an ethical crime against the pot smoker. An ethical crime is when your body is violated. But when someone treats you as though you are a slave. And that's what rulers are doing to us with marijuana laws. It is our rulers who are committing the ethical crime, not the person who's making a decision for their own body. Drug laws account for 1/6 of all arrests, 1/3 of those being for marijuana. And if you think that that's primarily going after sellers, it's not. 12/13 of the people arrested are just users. Number three, marijuana laws are an ethical crime against you who do not smoke pot. The first thing that rulers have to do to wage their war against marijuana users is to steal from you. They have to take your labor to buy their guns, to buy their prisons, to buy their battering rams, to buy their SWAT teams. They have to turn you into a slave first, and then force you to labor for their war. Number four, asset forfeiture. With asset forfeiture, your rulers can take your property without even proving anything. And then you must fight in years in court that you are innocent of the crime of selling marijuana or using marijuana. And many people just give up. Number five, marijuana laws are an ethical crime against minorities. This war was started as a ginned up fear campaign against drug-crazed minorities. According to FBI statistics, blacks are 4.1 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than are whites in New Hampshire. And that's despite having a similar incidence in marijuana usage. The drug war is removing the heads of families, making them unable to hold jobs in a portion of our community that needs jobs and needs intact families more than any other. Number six, marijuana laws are an ethical crime against the foreign poor. Your labor is stolen from you and given to psychopathic foreign dictators, who then beat, torture, cage, rape, and steal from their poor and their politically powerless peasants to prove their resolve to their U.S. partner. Those are just some of the ethical crimes of marijuana laws. But let's look at the consequential problems. Number seven, prohibition causes real crime. Alcohol prohibition fueled the rise of the mafia in the early 1900s, just as it has fueled the rise of gangs and cartels nowadays. Suppliers try to protect themselves from the government's unethical attack on them. And the resultant escalation of violence, which was first started by the rulers, is blamed on drug users. The Urban Institute estimates that 60% of drug offenders currently in jail are there not for violence, but simply for usage. Not one of them committed violence, but every single person who put them in jail threatened violence. Number 8, cronyism. Our Republican friends, if they were serious about ending cronyism, they would be looking at the drug war. There's plenty of money to be made supplying our rulers with ever greater spying on us, more firepower to threaten us, more listening devices, more breaking and entering tools, more assault vehicles, more prisons, more SWAT teams, and more tactical armor. Cronies buy off your rulers to get rich by supplying them with the tools of your enslavement. Number 9, bureaucracy. Again, our Republican friends complain about government bureaucracy, but is there a more entrenched, out of control, wasteful, corrupt, unaccountable, and violent bureaucracy? Number 10, ineffectiveness. Recreational marijuana laws may be great for cronies and for bureaucrats. But you know one thing they can't do is stem marijuana use. Number 11, ever-expanding government. But their solution to their ineffectiveness is just give me a little bit more power over you. Just give me a little bit more of your labor, and then you will stem marijuana use. And when that expansion inevitably fails, our rulers will tell you the reason why. It's you. You have too much freedom. And they have a solution to that. Number 12, less freedom. And so government expands into every crevice of your life, pretending to try to stop the unstoppable. You lose more and more of your freedoms, and more of your labor is stolen from you and wasted. Perhaps all along was really a war against your freedom and not against marijuana. Number 13, hypocritical. Their drugs, alcohol, tobacco, coffee, corn syrup, prescription drugs, those are okay. His, they're not. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to use whatever you want for your own body, that you have that right. I'm just saying they're different. Number 14, selective enforcement. When a law is impossible to enforce, the police cannot enforce it uniformly. Prosecutors and police must choose for whom to look the other way and on whom to drop the full weight of government violence. And they unconsciously must choose according to their biases. Number 15, destruction of ethics. We incur a loss of faith in ethics because rulers violate ethics to implement their unethical laws. And so people start to believe that no law can be ethical. Even laws that are ethical. The laws against violations of property and person. The very laws that the government are violating. Number 16, corruption. It is not unethical to pay off someone to not violate your human rights. However, once we start paying off to all rulers, that ethical corruption leaks into real crime, murder, and theft. That is the psychopathic world down which our rulers are leading us. Number 17, unwanted service. I can tell you how to end recreational marijuana laws. Charge it a la carte. How many of you would voluntarily pay 10, 25, 50% premium on your protection service charge in order to abuse your neighbors for what he does to his own body in his own home? No, I think I'll invest my labor in my family. Thank you very much. These unethical laws are possible only through extortion. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to end with number 18, a free state. How is it that authoritarian Massachusetts, authoritarian Vermont, authoritarian Maine, and even authoritarian Quebec protect their citizens' bodies more than we do? Our motto is not submit to unethical drug warriors or die. Our motto is live free or die. And we need to start living towards that motto. When I became a libertarian, I had to change a lot of my beliefs to align with the ethic of self-ownership, but not my hatred of marijuana laws. It's a poster child of government evil, of adverse consequences, of unintended consequences, of ever-expanding subjugation, of surveillance, invasion, theft, extortion. It demonstrates the cruelty of government violence, the fecklessness of government programs, the psychopathy of rulers, and the ignorance of the masses. When some jackbooted gang of thugs breaks down your door to your home for something that you're doing to your own body, when they shoot your dog, throw a flashbang into your baby's crib, point a rifle in your toddler's face, punch your wife down into the ground, beat you until you're unconscious, and then chain you, kidnap you, and place you in a cage where you're further assaulted and raped, and then steal your home and your property. I want you to be able to recognize who the person here who's committing evil. Big hint. It's not the person making a decision for their own body. The full legalization of recreational marijuana is not only consequentially sound, but it is ethically required for men to be free. In the live free or die state of New Hampshire, we should be all about freeing men.
Thank you, Dennis. Good evening. My purpose in volunteering to enter this day is not to discuss the benefits of medical marijuana, of which I am an advocate, address decriminalization, of which I approve of, or acknowledge the revenue that can be realized from the legalization of recreational cannabis. You will notice that throughout, I refrain from the use of the term gateway drug, because correlation does not mean causation. I am here in an attempt to enlighten the community on the hazards of recreational use of a substance which has a negative impact on the health of our adolescent and young adult population. Marijuana is also known as Acapulco Gold, Colombian Red, Panama Red, Thai sticks, grass, ganja, spliff, Mary Jane, and blunts. Marijuana, hashish, and hash oil are derived from the Indian hemp plant Cannabis sativa, a hardy weed that grows all over the world. It's seen on the street as a mixture of chopped, dried leaves, stems, flowers, and seeds. Cannabinoids are the chemicals found in marijuana. The active ingredient is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. This is the chemical in cannabis that is responsible for its psychoactive effects. There are cannabinoid receptors located throughout the brain. Effects will depend on the amount smoked, the potency, and the expectations and perceptions of the user. It's usually smoked in pipes or homemade cigarettes called joints. Each joint averages 4 to 40 milligrams of THC. Effects last from 1 to 3 hours, with first feelings occurring after a couple of minutes of smoking. Physical changes include an increased heartbeat, a rise in blood pressure, lowering of body temperature, and reddening of the eyes. Mind changes range from the uncomfortable to the glorious. For some, the body may calm down to an introspective like euphoria. Others may become gregarious and engage in ridiculous conversations. Confusion often sets in, with the user believing that profound revelations have been experienced. Later on, it's realized that these revelations are nothing more than everyday happenings. Part of this confusion is simple forgetfulness. Reaction time is increased. Space and time are misjudged. You go to the closet, but by the time you get there, you've forgotten why you went. You can't be judged to take the casserole out of the oven in 15 minutes or to hang a picture over the bed. Higher doses result in disorganized thoughts and impaired judgment. Most users experience an obsession for food known as the munchies. This is primarily due to compulsion to chew. The throat, mouth, and lips will feel dry and parched. Bad trips are possible with marijuana. A bummer, or bad trip, is a spiraling web of depression or paranoia that may seem overwhelming. There's a compensation factor associated with smoking marijuana. Long-time users are able to perform most simple and mundane tasks as if they aren't high at all. The primary reason for that is that the physiological and psychological effects of marijuana tend to be less than those of other illegal psychoactive drugs. There is a tolerance that develops to marijuana use. Unfortunately, a lot of false information about marijuana is circulated by people who profit from the sale of the drug. This is done because they want to maintain you as a customer. The marijuana now being sold today is 5 to 10 times stronger than it was back in the 1960s. Then it contained less than 2% THC. Today, it contains 20 to 25% THC. Earlier research studies were based on the older and less potent marijuana. Findings are now consistently showing that marijuana is harmful. THC remains in the body for about 30 days. A joint per week will constantly keep the body under the influence. The drug is deposited in body fat. It is deposited in the brain, testicles, and ovaries. They all absorb THC. Long-term use has adverse effects. Brain cells show alteration. The space between brain cells is widened and thickened. Electrical brain tracings show abnormal electrical discharge. There are effects on personality and behavior. The ability to think is impaired, especially when the job involves reasoning, logic, and abstract thinking. Smokers eventually lose their drive and motivation. The achievement of high goals loses its importance. Memory goes bad, particularly of recent events, and heavy users eventually become colorless and emotionally flat. There are effects on the endocrine system. Sperm decreases in motility. Women's menstrual cycles are disturbed. The offspring of lab animals exposed to marijuana while pregnant have a lower body weight at puberty. There are effects on the immune system. White blood cells show a decrease in their capacity to replicate. And we know that white blood cells are an important defense mechanism for the body. They attack and destroy invading organisms. There are effects on the lung. Marijuana smoke contains 50% more irritating and cancer-producing chemicals than tobacco smoke. Marijuana use has been strongly linked in adolescence to an amotivational syndrome, meaning regular users lack motivation, and this is very important in teens and college students who need to study. Take away their motivation, and they're not going to do well. Let's take a moment and look at human physiology. A person's brain is not fully developed until age 25. The frontal lobe of the brain is the site where decision-making is processed, and that doesn't finish developing until age 21. Researchers found that weed reduces blood flow to every part of the brain. Teens who smoke weed regularly have reduced activity in brain circuits critical to noticing new information and making decisions. A Northwestern University study found that marijuana users have abnormal brain structure, poor memory, and that chronic potted use may lead to brain changes resembling schizophrenia. In states like Colorado, Emergency room physicians have become experts on dealing with cannabis-induced psychoses. 27% of people with schizophrenia have been diagnosed with cannabis use disorder in their lives. The American Medical Association has consistently reaffirmed its position that marijuana is a dangerous drug. The AMA said, quote, "Heavy cannabis use in adolescence causes persistent impairments in neurocognitive performance and IQ. And use is associated with increased rates of anxiety and psychotic thought disorders," unquote. The National Academy of Medicine found in 2017 that cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of developing schizophrenia and other psychoses. Teenagers who smoke marijuana regularly are 3 times as likely to develop schizophrenia. Contrary to its reputation for making users relaxed and calm, cannabis appears to provoke many schizophrenics to violence. Frontiers of Forensic Psychiatry reported that young men with psychoses who used cannabis had a 50% chance of becoming violent. The most obvious way that cannabis fuels violence is via its tendency to cause paranoia, something even cannabis advocates acknowledge the drug can cause. Marijuana alone can eventually damage the mind and a person's ability to function if it is smoked heavily enough. Sometimes these changes come slowly, and sometimes they come rapidly, but they do happen. The burnout condition is very real.
I have 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Okay, so Randy's argued a case that marijuana is unhealthy. That's not the debate we're having here. The debate is whether we should be using violence to stop people from making decisions about their bodies. The debate here is who owns your body. I may do unhealthy things to my body. How many people here do unhealthy things to their body? Does doing unhealthy things to your body make you anyone's bitch? But it's about the kids. It's always about the kids. God, will somebody please help the goddamn kids? But is that true? Is taking away the dads from the family helping the kids? Is making their parents unemployable helping the kids? I was 16 at a friend's house when his mother spied a pool table filled with a pound of marijuana. She too wanted to protect her child, so she called the police to save her child from the evil dealer that I was. He was the one who was dealing. So you have to be careful here. Because when you start using the violence of the state to protect children, the violence of the state is employed upon children. There was enough marijuana in that room to lose someone decades of their life. So I ran. The cop chasing me unholstered his weapon. And on the dark driveway yelled out the words that were the scariest in my life. "Stop or I'll shoot." Now, I had an ounce on me that I had just purchased. But I also had some additional pot that would place me over the legal limit. And I was officially a seller. I was looking at serious crime. So I continued running. Luckily, he didn't shoot me. By the time that I was arrested, I had thrown away my pot. But wouldn't that have been a benefit to the children? had that cop blown away my spinal column 48 years ago. That would have protected the children, right? I was arrested 3 times. And those of you familiar with the justice system won't be surprised to learn that the only time I was convicted was when I was innocent. My choice then was either to fight in court, to lose my schooling, go to jail, or to plead to a lesser crime. And so I did what so many people did. I swore that I had committed a crime that I had not committed. And I was wealthy and white. What if I had been poor and black? We need to stop begging our rulers to abuse our neighbors and abuse our children simply because they have different ideas about how to use their bodies for their own lives, or because our neighbor's an incompetent parent. Cracking down on recreational marijuana is cracking down on children. It's cracking down on innocent adults. Because some people don't know how to inoculate their child against smoking pot, that's not sufficient argument to make me their slave. Look, if you don't like marijuana, don't use it. Don't hang out with people, don't work with them, don't trade with them, don't let them into your clubs. And if you don't want your child to use marijuana, work on that. Focus on your child. Take them out of the government schools. Homeschool them. Teach them. Cause them to respect you and your opinions. But don't think that the law is a magic wand, that all you need to do is pass a law and you'll get whatever you want without violating other human beings, without adverse consequences. Because all a law is a threat of overwhelming ruler violence. And either you submit or you will die. And that is really what you want aimed at your children?
You'll have to excuse me if I'm not entirely sure what I am rebutting, with all due respect, but I will take a moment to address illicit sales of marijuana. Legalization of marijuana does not eliminate the black market. In California, the legal marijuana market has grown to more than $3 billion, but remains dwarfed by a thriving black market, which brings in nearly $9 billion annually. There is no proof legalization will result in savings of law enforcement resources. The opposite has been seen in Colorado, with departments having to expand evidence rooms and requests to deal with black market investigations. Legalizing marijuana will not make a dent in America's state or federal imprisonment rates. That is because less than 0.3% of all inmates are there for smoking marijuana. Most are incarcerated for distribution, which is drug dealing, and or other associated crimes. I'll be happy to address other rebuttals during the question and answer period. That's all I have to offer at this point. Thank you.
Do you guys want to take the microphone so you can ask each other questions now during the Q&A, or do you think you can hear each other from the other side of the stage?
I'll just ask. So should I ask first? Am I sure?
Yeah, we'll let the affirmative go. You guys can sit and have like a discussion. I don't know if you can see each other through the podium, but
I'll just ask him and then
sure.
he can answer. So Randy, I ask you, who owns your body? Who decides what may go into it? Is it you? Is it me? Is it me and a group of people? Is it some ruler? Who owns you and who gets to decide what goes into you?
Well, of course I own my body. However, adolescents and children are not mature enough to make those decisions. My reasons for being against the legalization of recreational marijuana are purely altruistic. So yes, of course I own my body.
To follow up, Randy, you speak of altruism, but what responsibility do you have to other people's children? And what?
Well, I'm looking forward to the future of our country and our future leaders, our future scientists, and I want them to be able to function at their best and able capacity. So that is my concern, and that is my altruism.
Do you think it's the proper role for the government to make sure that we raise these children to fit these roles for our future leaders and officials, or do you think it's the role of the parents?
Both, cooperatively. I think there are certain laws that have to exist for the welfare of the population.
Are there any questions? Randy, do you have a question for Dennis at all?
I do, Dennis, and I ask this respectfully. Much of the presentation that you provided and the arguments that you gave are arguments and facts that could be used perhaps to justify the legalization of prostitution, which many seem to think is a victimless crime. How do you feel about that?
So I believe in self-ownership. I don't believe that anyone has a superior ownership of me. And so I understand that you may have decisions about people who do things with their bodies. I see it as something that is their decision. So unless, I mean, certainly if there's a case where somebody is being coerced and that type of thing, that is a violation. That is a violation of their body. And I'm against violations of people's bodies by private people. I'm against violations of people's bodies by rulers. I just don't distinguish who it is that's violating the body. I think that each person has their right to their own body. And you know, if you and I wanted to enter into a contract and we have like that, some of that nasty sex, that's our business.
Perhaps gain some revenue.
That's right. And whether we report it to our rulers or not, well, that's between us.
Dennis, do you think the state has any role whatsoever in protecting children, say, from abusive parents or parents that give their 11-year-old marijuana?
So I believe that parents don't own their children. I believe that their children have a right to their own body, and that parents are only stewards of their children. That they are responsible for the good care of their children. So therefore, I don't believe that parents may beat their children. I don't believe that parents may do things to their children that are against their consent. You know, there's a whole question of consent and that type of thing. But I mean, I was talking about teenagers. You know, I was talking about teenagers who are making decisions. And personally, I think that there's a big problem here with not knowing how to inoculate one's children. To not inoculating children to what the bad things are in the public. So I think that parents need more guide on how to parent. The way that we inoculated our child was to talk to her very candidly and show her examples and let her see what it was that we were talking about and let her know what our concerns were. And she trusted us because we homeschooled. We didn't put them into government school where they're bored out of their mind and self-medicating because they can't stand it. She was excited every single day. And so she trusted us, she respected us, she understood that we were learners together. And you know, she has made decisions that were well beyond me. My parents didn't know the right thing to do. They did a lot of bad things, which is what caused me to, I think, to use marijuana when I was a teen. So I think there's a lot of onus on parents that parents don't actually that parents don't take seriously right now.
All right, at this time, we'll open it up to the audience, and I believe Jenny had her hand up.
Yeah. My name is Jenny Wilson, and I have a question for Mr. Grant.
Dennis Pratt.
Yes,
Okay. For what is his name?
Mr. Pratt.
P-R-A-T-T.
Pratt. Okay. Mr. Pratt. Anyway, you said two things that got my attention. You said that marijuana laws are an ethical crime against minorities. I have a problem with that because, first of all, smoking marijuana has nothing to do with being ethical. Ethics is what ought to be done, the right thing. And a parent, and when you told me that minorities, you're like saying that minorities should smoke away, like minorities, the laws against marijuana are applied to everybody the same way. But when you throw in the minorities as part of your defense of your position, I think that it's putting minorities in a bad light. They have a mind too. They can be ethical, they can be moral, they can say, that's not good for my body, and they should be able. But when the government makes it available and legal, and I have no problem, you have a problem in your hands. And there's the second thing that you said.
May I address the first question first? And
That's
then
not a
you
question.
can-
That wasn't a question.
Oh, that was just a comment. You don't want a response.
You can respond.
No, it's okay. If you don't want a response, I'm fine not responding.
Yeah, because you said ethical crime against minorities. White people smoke too. Why do minorities have the right? Okay, this is a question. Minority has the right. The minorities, because they're black or Hispanic like me, have the right to just smoke.
So let me answer that question first. First of all, I don't think it's moral necessarily to smoke. And as a matter of fact, I would argue that you probably should not.
But you made it because you said ethics. You wrote
That's
ethics.
right. So when I use the word ethics, I talk about the minimum regard that we have to have for other human beings, and that is self-ownership. That is the minimum ethic of other human beings. Morals is something on top of that, and you can have morals to get up every morning at 5 o'clock and to pray to God, and you can have lots and lots of morals. When I'm talking about ethics, it's that minimum base level that we must afford every single human being. And it's the violation of ethics that is the real ethical crime that we have to stop, in my view. The ethical crime is when we use violence against somebody. So it's the violence against the minority that I'm against. Now, the minority, they can decide to use marijuana or not to use marijuana. And I would argue that we need more morals, more moral traditions in order to guide them to that. But whatever their decision is, we may not attack the minority for their decision about their own body. Does that make sense to you? That they own their own body just like a white person does. And that we may not attack their body for a decision that they may make. They may make it for a religious reason. They may think that marijuana, there are some Hispanic cultures in which marijuana is used for some ceremony or something like that. Okay? So they are making a moral decision. I have an ethical obligation to respect their body. And I may disagree with their moral decision. I may say, that's wrong for you to do that. I may even go so far as say, that's a stupid tradition. But I may not attack them. So I actually have a stronger ethic than you're arguing to support the minority.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because if you look at the definition of morality versus ethics, morality is what the majority thinks is the right thing to do. So if you have a corrupt society that says this is the moral standard, it's what the majority decides. Ethics is what ought to be. Morality is what the majority decides.
And I'm using those
I have
two
a
terms
problem
totally
with
different.
that. So anyhow, can I say my second one?
Please.
When you say that cracking down on adults who smoke marijuana is cracking down on children, and you also say that marijuana takes fathers, or marijuana enforced laws takes fathers away from children, I think that fathers who behave irresponsible by smoking marijuana, whether they're at work or in the car or with the kids, they're taking themselves away from the kids. They're going on a trip. That's all I have to say.
Do you want to respond to that in any way, Dennis, or should we just move on?
I mean, she just expressed her opinion that she thinks that marijuana is, is some sort of special thing that the father should be taken away from the child. And
I didn't say that.
You don't think so?
I said the father takes himself away from the child. It's not the cops taking them away.
Right, but I'm saying,
When he's
so would
smoking-
you agree that they should be threatened with death unless they go with the police to jail and be taken away from their family for smoking marijuana?
That's a story.
Do you believe that?
I think the father, the parents who have children at home and are raising a family should set the right example.
Of course they should, I agree with you. Of course, but
So that's what I'm
should
saying.
violence be used against them if they smoke a joint? That's the question, that's the only question. You and I agree that the fathers should be role models for their children. I totally agree that. I coach fathers to do that. That's it, you and I agree on that. The only thing we're disagreeing on is whether violence should be used against someone for smoking a joint.
Just because you get a ticket or a citation, that's not violence. That's getting your attention. That's like saying, pay attention. You are being a bad example for your children. When you use the word violence as if it's a win the argument, win it all. I disagree. Just because a cop comes to your house and say, you're selling marijuana, just because you have a joint, he's not going to put you in jail. I don't think. I used to be a cop.
Okay.
Disclosure.
Go ahead.
My question is for Randy. Regarding the comment you made about the future of America, I'd like to ask you, do you feel that, there are some people that might argue that we have an overpopulation of prison due to, drug-related crimes, and they're having to build more prisons, therefore costing taxpayers more money. Do you feel that the possibility of getting rid of these marijuana-related crimes and/or drug-related crimes, do you feel that if it actually starts to boost the economy, if we see that overpopulation crisis decrease, do you feel that that might sway your thinking on decriminalizing marijuana? Do you feel that that is a positive thing?
Well, thank you for your question. As I said in my introduction, I am an advocate for the decriminalization of marijuana. I also pointed out in my presentation that 0.3% or less are incarcerated for simply smoking marijuana. The vast majority are there for associated crimes along with marijuana use, theft, violence, whatever. So really, the number of people that are incarcerated for simply smoking marijuana is very, very small. And I am a personal advocate for decriminalization. I do not want to see someone's life ruined simply for having smoking marijuana.
Steve.
Question for Randy. You were speaking earlier about a lot of this consent and legalization having to do with the age of the people. So you were saying that I believe either age 21 or 25, our brains are still developing, therefore that affects our consent, that affects our ability to make decisions, and therefore we can't consent to legally smoking marijuana, or we shouldn't have access to it because we're not ready for it. Based off of that reasoning, I have two questions. Would you be in favor of legalizing it for people aged 25 and over? Or would you be in favor of making it illegal for people under the age of 25 from consenting to military service, having jobs, entering into expensive loans like student loans and stuff like that for $100,000, that kind of thing?
I served 26 years in the military, and I well remember when I took my interview for commission, I was asked a couple of very personal questions. One of them was, am I homosexual? Secondly, have I ever smoked marijuana? Those questions are no longer asked. Society is changing. But I remind you that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to legislate age groups when it comes to passing laws on drug usage. And alcohol and tobacco are perfect examples of that. Alcohol and tobacco get into the hands of children underage. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I can say that I don't believe that age restrictions and laws are successful based on alcohol and tobacco.
Any other questions? Go ahead up front.
I have a question for Mr. Heller. How do you see decriminalization being a better solution than legalization?
I'm not saying it's a better solution.
But you're in favor of one but not the other.
I'm in favor of both. Excuse me, I'm in favor of decriminalization, but not frank legalization of recreational.
So what's the benefit? I mean, how can you, what do you see as the benefit of decriminalization?
The benefit of decriminalization is we're not ruining someone's life for future employment, future military service, and by maintaining illegal status of recreational marijuana use, we're in the very least providing a deterrent to its use, particularly for the younger population, who are most vulnerable to its physiologic effects.
So what I mean is, how does that benefit the young people, if that's who you're trying to protect? How does decriminalization protect them in a way that legalization would harm them?
Any deterrent serves as a positive effect because it makes it more difficult for that to take place. That's why we an advocate for deterrence.
Well, I don't need to jump into the debate, but one of the points you raised was in California, the illegal market is 3 times, I think you said,
it is
higher than the legal market. So even legalization doesn't wipe out the illegal market by your argument. So what is the benefit to only going to the point of decriminalization versus legalization? Because this illegal market will still exist according to your argument.
Again, I would refer back to deterrence and maintaining a legal status for recreational marijuana serves as a deterrent, or it should serve as a deterrent.
Could I speak a little bit to that? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's been a number of studies about the effect of legalization. Boston College, who examined more than 1 million high school students over a period of 1999 to 2017. They published in the Journal of Adolescent Health data that showed that not only was there no evidence linking a rise of marijuana use amongst adolescents in states with legal recreational marijuana, but that the frequency of use declined by 16% after recreational marijuana legalization. And that's the largest study that's been done. There's been other studies that have been done. There's, a few of them kind of show some possible ill effects, but a meta study was done that showed that overall there's no discernible difference with legalization. And I think that the use, the frequency use makes sense to me. I mean, as somebody who knows that it's something of a counterculture. When it's legalized, that mystique is gone.
Stephen, you had another question?
Yeah, I was wondering if both participants could speak to what they've seen in the drug world, particularly with harm to individuals using drugs since the 80s, since we've steeply increased penalties on hardcore drugs, and if there's any correlation there between harm to individuals with marijuana, specifically like the crack cocaine and heroin and opioids.
Well, I had discussion of gateway drug, because correlation does not mean causation. Just because someone has used marijuana, I don't believe necessarily means that they'll move on to other
That's not really what I'm trying to, like, maybe I worded that funny. I'm trying to say, since harder drugs were made illegal, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to your opinion on what effect on society that has done. Like, has it made our society more peaceful, or more violent? Has it helped people more, or has it harmed people more by making these hardcore drugs have higher punishments and push them solely to the black market or to prescription drugs, essentially?
Well, if I'm interpreting what you're asking, you're suggesting that you cannot successfully outlaw drugs. Well, I think to a large degree you can. And let me cite an example. In Singapore, 0.005%, and that's minuscule, of the population in Singapore use because the penalties are so severe. All right? So, yeah.
So do you advocate for the death penalty for
No,
hardcore
of course
drugs?
not. Of course not. But I am pointing out that with severe penalties, you can reduce the amount of drug use. With this Singapore, 0.005% of the population's use because of the laws.
Would you advocate for lifetime sentencing
No.
for
No.
dealers? No.
I'm citing an example because you're asking, okay? And I'm pointing to an example where there's proof that laws can restrict illegal drug use. Yes.
Before Scott's arm gets tired, we're gonna go to Scott.
Mr. Eller, Dennis, you can always jump in if you want. Would you say that prohibition of alcohol was a failure? And what is the difference between the prohibition of alcohol fundamentally and the prohibition of marijuana? Is it, would you say that, like, alcohol is very obvious, case study where crime increased, Al Capone went away, the gangsters went away. The gangsters actually funded prohibition campaigns in counties so they could make a profit. Would you say that same thing is happening with the cartels? They actually benefit from either the prohibition of cannabis or legalization of cannabis and making it very expensive, like in Illinois, my home state, they tax it 20%. They make it insanely expensive. So can you talk about the difference and what you think about prohibition and the prohibition of marijuana?
By heavily taxing it, it just feeds the black market, does it not?
But what is the, like, can you, do you believe that, like prohibition of alcohol, the prohibition of marijuana has led to more crime? Like more gangsters, since it's more gangs fighting for territory, that sort of thing?
Well, California is a prime example. We have legal recreational marijuana in California, yet we still have a thriving black market. So I don't think you're ever going to be able to stop the black market, whether you have prohibition.
Can I piggyback a little bit on what Scott was asking? Because I'm also from Illinois, and you're a little off on your 20%. It's a little closer to 45, 50. So, and the taxation is so high that in and of itself is creating the black market.
Sure.
So, when we have recreational marijuana become legal, we still have a black market, possibly even an increased black market, depending on what numbers we're looking at. Could that be the driving force? It is government interference driving that black market. Eliminate the government interference, eliminate the black market. Just a hypothetical.
Perhaps. And I see you speaking from a libertarian standpoint, and I have no argument with that.
Oh. Is it related, Scott? Or-
Totally different.
All right, we have one back here. I forgot your name again. Go ahead.
Brittany.
Brittany, go ahead.
Yes, this is regarding the comment you made about Singapore. If I'm correct in saying that you were suggesting that they outlawed this in Singapore with the 0.02%, my question to you is respectfully, how can you be so sure that they're not using, how do they know this? Or what if they're using in such a way where they can't be found out? Such as, and I know this is unrelated, but there are foreign countries where Christianity is illegal and they practice Christianity secretly, quietly, so that they can't be found out. So how can you be so sure that marijuana is outlawed or drug use is outlawed in Singapore, knowing that how these types of things tend to work?
Well, we have to question the study, go back and take a look at the study.
Right?
About,
What are they doing, mass drug tests, or what, how do you know?
how do I know? I'm citing a study that was taken in Singapore by legitimate individuals, be it scientists or legislators, to determine drug use.
Well, then I guess I'm asking, how would they know that they're not using it? How do they know that it's outlawed?
It's a hypothetical question I can't answer.
Okay.
Scott, let's just go with Aiden real fast and
Yeah, Randy, if the black market is the concern with legalization, I mean, how can you put that against, compare that to the situation we have in this state with liquor, where the state holds monopoly over all liquor sales? I mean, I don't see a thriving black market in the liquor industry around here. I mean, restaurants and bars are required to purchase their product through the state. You know, I mean, I just don't see it. I mean, my view of that has always been that alcohol is similar in terms of like a drug use as marijuana might be. I mean, they can have negative health effects. They can both impair judgment. You know, I mean, is it really that the issue with your position is that decriminalization should happen over the age of 21 and not below a certain age? Is that really the sticking point, or is it simply that why would you be in favor of one product and not another when they both have similar adverse effects? And you live in a state where the state is claiming a monopoly over one of those products. Like the state is actually the vendor of that product.
Well, let's take, for example, nicotine. Nicotine does not interfere with cognitive function. Okay? So if you're an adolescent smoking marijuana and you're going to school, it's going to interfere with your ability to learn. Okay? So whenever marijuana legalization advocates are talking about the dangers of alcohol and tobacco, they're really talking about the abusive use of those drugs. The question posed here for the debate is, do you advocate legalization of recreational marijuana or not? Not do you advocate the legalization of recreational marijuana for specific age groups? It's extremely difficult to legislate restrictions on drugs for specific age groups. That's proven by alcohol and tobacco. We still have children using alcohol and tobacco. That wasn't the debate question this evening.
Well, that was just a question. I mean, is the issue an age? So you would be you're against the legalization of alcohol? Is that what you're saying? I mean, there is such a thing as a temperance.
I think you're putting words in my mouth.
Well, I just don't understand why you would be against one and not the other.
Because there's a vast difference between the physiological harmful effects of THC use and that of alcohol or tobacco. And when you're talking about alcohol and tobacco's negative effects, you're talking about the abuse of those drugs. Yes.
we're gonna go with Scott, Nick, and then Jeff, and then Brittany will close it out for us.
Randy, I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, I'm not trying. We had a constitutional amendment to prohibit alcohol in 1918. Where in the Constitution, and it was repealed, where in the Constitution where in the Constitution is the government given authority to prohibit drug use and marijuana? Where in the Constitution, given that, as far as I know, I don't see an amendment saying we should prohibit marijuana, just like the amendment said you should prohibit alcohol, where in the Constitution do you derive your authority to prohibit marijuana? And
The same question that you're posing to me at this moment can be posed regarding heroin, morphine, cocaine.
so are those unconstitutional, when you say? Are they constitutional or unconstitutional, those prohibiting those drugs? Is it unconstitutional to prohibit drugs?
I'm not really seeing that question as germane to the debate. Whether we want to talk about constitutional law here this evening or legalization of a drug that's harmful to adolescents and young adults.
The resolution specifically says, should New Hampshire legalize recreational marijuana? I don't know if we want to get into a huge constitutional argument.
I'm not going to get off the tangents of constitutional law.
Right.
No, thank you.
I think Nick had his hand up.
What is in the Constitution said that the government
For Mr. Harper, I was wondering, you mentioned that, oh, now everyone's looking at me. You mentioned that penalties serve as a deterrent for any number of behaviors that are detrimental to social groups, to their cohesion, to the continuation of civilization. But you mentioned that you didn't want to see people's lives destroyed, which was why you advocated for decriminalization rather than legalization.
Right.
What would be, would you consider would be the nature of a penalty that would serve as a deterrent without limiting the future prospects of people to find employment, advance their lives, should they make an infraction?
What? Can someone tell us what the current penalty in the state of New Hampshire is for a minimal amount of possession of marijuana? I think it's a financial fine amounting to a small amount.
The first couple times.
Yeah. Does that not seem
And then it's not.
Does that not seem seems adequate to me? The military is no longer asking that question to whether or not you smoke marijuana to be able to serve on active duty. But things are changing.
I think maybe possession of marijuana paraphernalia is still a felony, technically.
Or a certain large amount in your possession, or dealing.
Jeff, did you have a question besides that, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask a question that I think was implied. Granted, the argument was largely based on protecting children from harmful behaviors. Mm-hmm. And then Dennis asked, he said, I think you should be able to do harmful behaviors, and gave some examples. What's your opinion on making it no longer legal for kids to have access to sugary goods and items like that, which I think we know, which I'm sure we can all agree are much more harmful than marijuana in terms of obesity rates and diabetes and heart disease.
And what effect does it have on the developing brain or the ability to function while in life or school?
I could actually try to answer that for you. There's actually I couldn't tell you where I read the study, but there was a study done on, they were doing actually a study on inmates in a prison. And they noticed that the inmates that were actually more violent were consuming more sugar than the inmates that were not as violent. So it does have some effect on the brain. So I guess I can, back him up with that.
Not likely a permanent.
Perhaps. I'm not sure, but I do remember reading a study like that. Actually, I think that there was, yes, I think the book was called African Holistic Health, and in there was the study that was done, that he shared a study that was done on inmates in a particular prison. Before I ask you my question, I'd like to be clear. Were you suggesting before that marijuana, long-term marijuana use has more of a harmful effect than alcohol? Before I ask my question, I just want to be clear. Is that what you were suggesting? Okay.
Let me point out that U.S. Senator Cory Booker claimed states which legalized marijuana saw a decrease in violent crime. That's absolutely wrong. The first 4 states to legalize recreational marijuana had a combined murder rate of 450 and a combined aggravated assault rate of 30,300. Subsequent to legalization, that increased to 620 murders and 38,000 aggravated assaults, an increase of 37% and 25% respectively. The statistics don't lie. Senator Booker was wrong.
Earlier, you said you made a comment about causation correlation. Is there any evidence to back that up, that one relates to the other?
You can draw your own conclusions.
All right, we're just going to go with Aiden, and we went quite a bit over time, but Aiden's got the last question.
So,
All right, we'll go one more.
The question of the debate, if New Hampshire were to decriminalize marijuana,
Which they already have.
Well, you know, but to legalize it. Sorry, recreational marijuana in contravention of federal law, that could have effects on our state in other ways, some funding for certain issues. Is it wise to advocate for this position?
It's an ethical requirement. It is an ethical requirement to stop violating human beings, to stop using violence against human beings, to stop abusing human beings. If you're saying, will we lose money if we stop abusing people? I think the answer becomes very clear. That's not relevant. We have to stop evil.
I lied. There's one last question here in the back, and then we'll move on to the closings.
The question is for Randy. There's been a couple of questions involving kind of comparing alcohol and marijuana. And in those instances, you were saying that that the negatives were due to abuse. So my question is how does that constitute recreational marijuana? At what line would that be abuse of marijuana? Where would that line be drawn? Is it just one?
Well, let's say, that's more than say, it's a fact that approximately 10% of marijuana users become addicted to marijuana. And there is an associated withdrawal syndrome with marijuana addiction. That addiction rate for alcohol is somewhat less. 1 in 15 users of alcohol become addicted to alcohol. Whereas 1 in 5 marijuana users are using marijuana on a daily basis.
All right. Just in the interest of time, is it a quick question or is it a big, long discussion?
Just more of a comment regarding the addiction rates versus alcohol versus marijuana. The death toll rate for drunk driving has skyrocketed over the last 10 years, I would say. Domestic violence calls from police usually always involve alcohol. PSTD cases are aggravated by alcohol use. I can kind of go on with alcoholism, which, I mean, you could just look at the amount of rehab facilities for alcoholism and you could kind of weigh what's more addictive and what isn't, and how many more people get addicted to alcohol versus marijuana just by looking at those statistics.
It's because alcohol is more available, is it not? Let me point out that in Colorado, traffic fatalities involving operators testing positive for marijuana has increased 100% since legalization. From 2011 through 2013, there was a 57% increase in marijuana-related emergency room visits in Colorado. Memory and attention problems have been found in children whose moms use marijuana in pregnancy.
How many of those cases resulted in death or the violence against another human being, or I mean, I don't know if you know that, I'm just simply putting that out there that...
Well, I've heard that argument that marijuana users prove to be better drivers because they drive more slowly. And I counter that by saying time and space are misjudged under the influence of marijuana. Distance as well. So that's compensated for by driving more slowly.
All right, everyone, thank you for the Q&A, and then 7 minutes, go ahead.
I've given plenty of consequential reasons for why we should end state violence against those who may use marijuana recreationally. They include increased increased organized crime, out of control bureaucracy, cronyism, a loss of freedom, extortion of non-marijuana users, violence against poor foreigners, a decrease in ethics, scofflawing at real crime, corruption for real crime, selective enforcement, ever-expanding government, hypocrisy, and let's face it, ineffectiveness. My opponent has cited a couple of reasons why he might wish that marijuana laws were ethical, that marijuana laws were effective, and that marijuana laws came without adverse consequences. His wish is just a wish. The cost of using violence to prevent a choice for one's own body is just too high. It's too costly consequentially, and it's too costly ethically. It costs us our soul. There are nonviolent ways that Randy can move towards what he wants. If he doesn't like marijuana users, he doesn't have to associate with them, trade, work, or love with them. If he thinks that marijuana is unhealthy, well, he can present his evidence to the marijuana user, suggest that he rethink his choices, but yet honor his humanity enough to allow him to make his own choice for his own body without threatening him with death. If he is concerned about teens making poor choices, present his evidence to the teens and help parents to parent them, but don't threaten them with guns, having their spines blown out. None of Randy's concerns gives anyone any right to enslave a grown-ass man and an adult woman, to take their bodies away from them simply because they might use their body in a way that Randy or you might disapprove of. Let me put it this way. Even if Randy could prove that using ruler violence against marijuana smokers and against taxpayers produced no adverse consequences, that it was 100% effective in ending recreational marijuana use for adults and for teens, and that marijuana use was really, really, really bad for your health, which frankly you cannot do, I would still be against marijuana laws. Those laws are taking our bodies and enslavement of free men, a violation of our most fundamental human right of our self-ownership. They must be rejected by free men in a freed society. They are an abomination. New Hampshire is being embarrassed by our more authoritarian states, neighbors. Our great unique position as the freest region in the world is undermined because a few hypocrites want to initiate violence against grown adults to force their bodies to their wishes. For our bodies are not theirs to control and to own and to use violence in. There needs to be one place on this earth where men can truly be free, where we can own our own bodies and use them as we choose for whatever we want in our own lives, where we are slaves to no man, including any ruler. That state, I submit, should be the great state of New Hampshire. And we need to correct those abominations that are these laws threatening death upon otherwise innocent people for simply desiring to inhale marijuana into their own bodies for fun or relaxation. You don't have to like such people. You don't have to associate with such people. You don't have to hire them or trade them. But you do have to respect their humanity, their self-ownership, if we are ever to be a truly free society.
this and your questions. I'd like to assure you that some of my best friends are former and current users of marijuana, and I love them very much. My reasons here for speaking out against the legalization of recreational marijuana are really and truly altruistic. I speak from experience just as much as Dennis speaks from experience. I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I lived through the Summer of Love in 1969. I frequented the Haight on the weekends. I saw it. I saw what it did. And that's one of the reasons that I'm advocating the way I'm advocating this evening. Hard data on the relationship between marijuana and mental illness dates back 150 years. Soon enough, the mental illness and violence that follow cannabis use will be too widespread to ignore. Marijuana makes its users lose their purpose and their will, as well as their memory and motivation. Its use jeopardizes a young person's chances of success in both school and life. I echo the words of Alex Berenson, author of Tell Your Children, The Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence. Quote, almost everything you think you know about the health effects of cannabis, almost everything advocates in the media have told you for a generation is wrong, unquote. In closing, I would like to posit the following to any clinician in the audience. With all the challenges we face from alcohol and tobacco that end up in the hands of children, does it make sense to make one more available? Is it morally criminal or not to facilitate inebriation over sobriety? Thank you and good evening.
One quick announcement I wanted to make at the beginning. I forgot. Next month's debate is already set, scheduled October 25th. The resolution is New Hampshire should secede from the United States. We'll see all of you there. Again, just so we can make this an official debate, I moved all the voting stuff over here to this little table. If you want to just go over here, recast your votes and I'll tally it up. Talk amongst yourselves.
Our next Big Liberty idea, the first Wednesday of the month, will be on recreational marijuana laws. That'll be your chance.
For everybody that hasn't signed up, the Shell is sponsoring a race. Seacoast runs for 3 generations, so if you haven't signed up, want to run, please sign up. And then don't we have to vote?
Hey, yeah. Revoting's over here in the middle.
Ooh, an assortment. There you go. Good job. Dragon face.
You did a good job. You have fun?
Yeah. Sorry for that.
What?
Nice job.
Thank you.
It was very entertaining.
It was entertaining. I didn't even notice. So tell me more entertaining. Tell me how it was entertaining.
It was fun to watch the debate. You did a great job. You did a really good job. I had no idea what to expect in terms of what he was going to argue, because I hadn't heard someone argue against legalization in an incredibly long time.
Right.
So that could have gone any way.
Yeah, I was disappointed he never really addressed the ethical argument.
And I thought that might be the case because, again, I didn't know how he would possibly defend.
Yeah, I know. I didn't chicken out a little bit.
Right.
I didn't chicken out completely, but
I think you reject the concept of.
That's the only way to work.
where you are.
Push it. 90% of what we push fails, and if we get 10%,
It was 38.1 voting, with an increase of 5.89. Dennis Pratt.
One vote, Good job, both people.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you,
So
Dennis.
it's one of the undecided switch?
One of the undecided split.
I wasn't here.
It was a good time. It was a fun one for me, for sure. I felt like I was watching. I think it's hard.
Yes. I was thinking about that too.
I agree with Randy.
Although I don't think it was the first one. I
I've seen that. I've seen it. It was like a woman.